don't you just come with me?
Ain't nothing gonna change in Atlanta. I mean, I'm still gonna be black. Just another nigga from the ghetto.
Why do you say stupid shit like that?
Vanilla or chocolate strawberry. Let's call the whole thing up.
To balance what's going to be a sensitive but interesting topic, I wrote a light little joke to start things off on a light little note, and to poke some fun at racism itself. How can you tell if someone from Boston is racist? They drop their R's for every word except one.
What are you saying? The sheriff is near. No, gotta blame it, dang running. The sheriff is a nigger.
Have you noticed that YouTube and other platforms seem to be promoting more divisive content recently? I don't know if people are making more of it, but if you click on a racial or ethnically polarizing video, you'll get back 20. Content that might have been flagged or at least suppressed in recent years is for some reason right now being promoted. It looks like the algorithms are turning up the heat. Right now, everyone has some kind of resentment or fatigue on display. And everyone talks about how they're noticing things. Things about blacks, or things about Jews, or things about whites, things about men, things about women, things about anyone and everyone except ourselves, of course. It's always someone else.
That's not a good start, but keep going.
If you've watched some of my other Channel 11 content, then you know that this will not be a defense of any of the out-of-control behavior that has been put squarely and fairly under the microscope as of late. I've been critical of all kinds of negative behavior, even the particular ones I believe to be more prevalent in the so-called black community. We all know the kind of behaviors I'm talking about. The criticism that follows does not come from a place of hate or self-hate at all. So before I start, let me dismiss that tired dismissal. What follows is coming from an easily relatable, easy to appreciate place, that sincere corner of concern and self-interest, and I don't mind admitting it. Because in a better world, the thing that would unite everyone is a vested interest in the entirety of the human race, stepping up its game. Anyone, regardless of color, who hasn't figured out that doing better starts with you, should consider the possibility that you're the ninja that needs to be noticed right now.
That's wrong. That's wrong.
Because fools wilding out on a budget cruise ship, while aggravating and troubling, is, in the grand scheme of everything going on in the world right now, not the most important thing to fixate on. And it's why this channel can't focus on that stuff exclusively. It's why I won't dunk on black or scapegoat white as I criticize things and mindsets. It would be very easy for me to get extra clicks by taking a hard partisan stance and putting on a sensational, emotional reaction every time someone acts a fool. I too could turn on a camera and with no script, come out yelling, "What's up fam, it's your boy CL. Can you believe these ninjas are at it again?" People like that stuff. And admittedly, I dig some of it too. But I'm not interested in doing it. I'm concerned with clearly expressing as much nuance as possible in this format, and being careful not to say anything that could be reasonably misinterpreted, or anything I might regret down the road. I'm trying to be right over being seen. This makes my process a necessarily slower one, and it comes at a price. This is not to diss other creators and their approach. There's a ton of real talent out here, and being boldly critical is okay. And it can even do a lot of good depending on the approach. But performative rants are simply not what I'm trying to do here. I plan on returning to non-racial topics after today, but this one should not feel racially divisive, except of course for those who insist on being offended. I think you'll find this pointed but conciliatory and reasonable. I would prefer that the bulk of this message be something that everyone could agree on, but know full well that that's an impossible task. I'll proceed anyway. There are a lot of issues and things in the news cycle that consistently illustrates people's tendency to point the finger. And while I have no problem with where a valid criticism starts, my radar goes off depending on how and where that criticism stops. And this term exposes the limits of thinking of most people, and that's understandable. This is an emotional term. It's a polarizing term. It was intended to be polarizing. I can't think of any other word that seeks to dehumanize people as radically as this one. And yet, it's still a word. And the reactions to it, particularly the emotional ones, are telling. From this point forward, I will occasionally use the N-word explicitly in its clinical sense, because we're adults, and we need to be able to talk about this boldly if we're to talk about it honestly. With all of its spin-offs, we can't really talk about or fully appreciate the impact of nigger specifically while evading the word itself. But I will be bleeping it to prevent this video from being unnecessarily suppressed any more than it should be. The bleeps will also allow this video to point and refer to that precise potent word it's talking about, while taking off some of the sting of hearing it as it comes up. I think that's a fair trade-off.
If you do not tell us where we can buy a shrubbery, my friend and I will say, nee.
Do your worst.
Very well. If you will not assist us voluntarily, nee.
No! Never!
No, it's not that. It's nee. Nee, that's it, you got it.
Since there is a difference between the soft and hard-ard version of this word, these terms need to be stated explicitly to avoid the confusion attached to their usage. At times I'll use the cultural default euphemism of the N-word, or I'll use the latest evasion, ninja. I'll also use these euphemisms to avoid repeating the same words over and over again. This is for the sake of variety, and not from a need to self-censor.
When you stopped Voldemort, don't say his name. Sorry. When you stopped, you know who.
You say after, and I say after. Laughter, laughter, after, after. Let's call the whole thing off.
Let's approach this touchy subject and word with a more nuanced, even-handed approach, as opposed to a rage bait one. Again, you'll find that the criticism that follows will not be directed at one group exclusively, and everyone sensitive enough will have a chance to be mildly or dramatically offended, depending on your disposition or preferences. But nothing that follows will be mean or pick on anyone based on race. Because while acknowledging that racism will always be something among people as currently constituted, I think racism's impact in recent decades has been exaggerated and used as a divisive weapon that is right now more destructive than racism itself. Let me say that again. Racial attitudes and resentments are a considerably smaller problem than how they're being used by institutions of power for the purpose of division and social engineering. And due to the dishonest, cowardly, and unsophisticated way the media and people frame matters relating to behaviors, patterns, and racial hostilities, our culture is growing more of the bad stuff. It's very obvious what's happening and the trap that's being set.
I've got one that can see.
I don't like this one bit.
Like the game of chess, let's begin by moving the white piece. Anyway, regarding the defense of the N-word being used by white people, one argument you'll hear quite often from some folks is that black people use it too. In fact, they use it so much and it's so pervasive in black culture, how can black people even pretend to be offended by it? And this I find to be an either disingenuous or short-sighted argument. But it's not a non-starter. We can use it to open things up. Because nigger versus nigga, even though it's a lame attempt to take back that word, which it doesn't, by the way, nigga is a valid contextual distinction in certain situations. And it does matter because context matters. So we'll start from there. And I'll get into the specifics of this point in a minute.
And being that we use it as a term of endearment, niggas start to bug to the domas where the fear went.
I get tired of people talking about bad words and bad language. Bullshit. It's the context that makes them good or bad.
Most everyone, regardless of color or political affiliation, is very capable of understanding contextual distinctions when it benefits them, and when other people not understanding context enacts a price upon them. This is the tendency of most people to make contextual distinctions and apply rational thinking selectively and beneficially, and it's f***ing infuriating. Black people do this, white people do this, every group seems to succumb to this tendency. We are all definitely and differently selfish in quality and quantity. And if we could admit that much, the rest of this will be more enlightening than offensive. Because most everyone likes to think or say that their ideological opposition is incapable of rationality and unable to perceive contextual distinctions. And this is most certainly not the case. Most people, in my experience, are quite capable of seeing the complexity of things, just long enough for it to include themselves and often themselves exclusively. And people can see and will complain about other people doing this very thing, even as they do it themselves. Have you noticed this? You have a blind spot, says everyone about everyone else. And this is why together we're all failing on this planet. And of course, I include myself in this criticism. I've done this too, and can only try to minimize this tendency in myself. Most of us are so concerned with winning arguments that we don't admit when we're wrong, or when our opponents simply have a valid point. With all of this so-called black fatigue, the N-word is being thrown around a lot more carelessly right now. I don't love the word, but I don't believe that using it should require you to lose your job, or get publicly exposed, or to have to move because of it. Of course, there are times when it's appropriate for a business to make the business decision to fire someone after their subpar behavior has been turned into internet content. I'm all in on criticizing bad behavior, but maybe we don't need to share everything. The right response to a charged situation, again, depends on context. The way we do things and the order we do them in matters. Everything is contextual, which means there'll never be a singular formula that'll work or will please everyone. As a society, we always have to ask, what is the right response here in consideration of the unique circumstances of this situation? This includes the out loud use of the N-word and how we respond to the out loud use of the N-word. And regarding the N-word, everyone would do well to consider for themselves when and why do they want to say it. Because there's going to be a lot of different motivations that don't break down as cleanly as racism for white folks or racial empowerment for black folks. Asking this question introspectively and fearlessly can yield some insight. By their own admission, we know there are some white people that simply think that black people are inherently and significantly inferior and are thus deserving of the N-word designation, regardless of reality and against all of the many considerations that make a person largely good or largely bad. But I suspect that a larger portion of the white population are resorting to inflammatory language as a natural response to a media-driven culture that decided to permit and even promote poor social behavior, while branding anyone who criticizes it with a scarlet R, even when the criticism is well considered and calmly delivered. In reality, racially charged situations are often more complicated than we might perceive. We should all be more willing to concede that sometimes the motivation behind things are racist, other times they're not. Sometimes the ugliest things are said, not so much from sincere belief, but from the desire to hurt the other person as badly as possible in the moment. Other times, people feel the pull of their emotions and assumptions and allow it to take them to crazy town, regardless of reality or consequences.
Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't.
But here's where this gets really touchy. What if there is racial bias or even hatred driving a criticism? Does that by itself invalidate the criticism? Can we learn nothing about ourselves from someone else's resentments? The scary adult answer to that question is,
yes, we can.
The government and the media's overall effect on race relations must be restated. They are not anyone's friends. Through numerous figurative channels, our culture is being shaped to promote the spread of racial disharmony. Beyond censorship, one way this happens is through the unsophisticated framing of racial and non-racial topics constrained for the fragile sensibilities of our most sensitive neighbors. Through this constraint, destructive but also constructive criticism is limited, and this guarantees that progress stagnates while problems proliferate, and this drives further resentment. But by letting our emotions get the best of us, we fall into the trap. Since its inception, the media has functioned at least partly as a divisive mediator, but they haven't done it without the help of our own pathologies, resentments, and reactions. Humans are predictably selfish, and that makes our culture and its citizens predictably controllable.
Good, Anakin, good. Kill him. Kill him now.
I shouldn't.
Do it.
You know what the scariest thing is? To not know your place in this world. To not know why you're here. It's just an awful feeling.
I am he as you are, he as you are, me, and we are all together.
When a black man amicably refers to another black man or person of color, another term I'm not fond of, as nigga, there's no racial animosity attached to it. There's no criticism in it. It's the opposite, in fact. It is, just like that Beatles song, one black man saying to another, I am you and you are me, and we are together, at least in our blackness. And if black people were still sitting below the decks of slave ships or standing together on plantation soil, or if this was 1850 or even 1960, I'd sympathize with this particular idea considerably more.
I'm a nigga, he's a nigga, she's a nigga, we some niggas, wouldn't you like to be a nigga too?
So do I agree with using the specific term to make a point about racial solidarity in our current time? No. And even if it sounds awfully fun and cool to be in Eazy-E's fictional nigga club, I'll sit this one out forever.
But now you look around these days, there seems to be a Dr. Pepper craze. I'm a pepper, he's a pepper, she's a pepper, we're a pepper, wouldn't you like to be a pepper too?
I'm not interested in being anyone's nigga, no matter how you spin it. Because while the soft R N-word aims to be sympathetic and claims to be empowering, it still reduces another black person to their physical attributes. It's still necessarily reductive. And if you want to consider yourself that way, you do you, but don't try to do me.
Now I bet you niggas do think y'all white. College don't mean shit. Y'all niggas, and you gon' be niggas forever, just like us. Niggas. You're not niggas.
Because more often than not, nigga still implies little more than black, or having black affectations or proximity to black people, or, God forbid, ghetto culture. What other distinction could it be making besides these surface-level, material ones? And to restate a recurring theme of this channel, people are more than this. You cannot be a religious, spiritual person and be racially self-obsessed at the same time. You can fight for justice along racial lines when injustice along those lines is legitimate, but that's not the same thing. If your response to an ideology that attempts to reduce you to race is to double down on it by softening the N-word with a vowel and using the term in friendly conversation, you may have taken your racial identity a bit too far. Even as I sympathize with how and why this happened historically, we don't need to perpetuate this habit.
Bitch, this, bitch, that, nigga, this, nigga, that. In the meanwhile, my pockets are getting fat. Getting paid to say this shit here. Making more in a week than a doctor makes in a year.
And while we needn't fear the N-word or avoid it altogether, the attempt to pretend that you can spin nigger into gold by co-opting it, flipping it, and propagating it in film and hip-hop, well, that slave ship has sailed. The attempt to defang Ger by saying guh instead has degraded our larger culture and has bound it more tightly onto racial fixations. It's done more harm than good, and the media and its controllers and its consumers love this shit.
Ain't the devil happy?
And who would have thought that, right? Who would have thought that saying a word over and over again would make it go away in a superficial sense without it first sinking its teeth even deeper beneath the skin and into our collective psyche? Anyone in theory could have seen this coming, but no one in reality did, because no one on the consumer side of this was thinking about it too deeply in the first place. We simply used the word. And I think people, particularly young black people, just said it because they thought it made them look cool and sound tough. A way to feel a bit empowered without actually being empowered. When you think you're inferior or invisible, or when you've internalized hatred or your own insecurities so profoundly, you might cling to anything that gives you a shred of identity, even if it's a hostile one, and maybe because it's a hostile one.
I'm not a mistake. It all makes sense. In a comic, you know how you can tell who the arch villain's going to be? He's the exact opposite of the hero. I should have known way back when. You know why, David? Because of the kids.
They called me Mr. Glass.
But the problem is that angry or just ignorant folks of all shades all want in on that N-word action too. There's something gross but rebellious about it, and we're all a bit dumber that this thing has proliferated. Again, I'm not for censorship or censoring others, but I am for the more conscientious, voluntary, judicious use of our language, hopefully accompanied by some positive social pressure surrounding its use. But having to suffer people say ger or guh is the price of free expression. A price I accept because the alternative to free speech is always worse.
I took everybody else's advice, then they ran on me. Everybody called me a real so I gotta stand on it.
And even as I concede that the context of ninja or ninjure is meaningfully different depending on who it's coming from, black people, with some help from the media and especially our music industry frenemies, have kept the N-word at the center of the larger cultural consciousness, and it has served almost exclusively as a toxic mantra.
Bitch, this, bitch, that, nigga, this, nigga, that.
But our irritation upon hearing that word from others is the proof that it's still a sensitive point for many of our more sensitive black and white neighbors. But maybe it hurts because some of us have yet to get over our internal shortcomings, insecurities, and frustration over what we believe the word might say about ourselves or the world we live in. We haven't, in fact, taken that word back. And why would anyone want to take back something that wasn't worth having in the first place? instead of remixing it, more of us should have focused on transcending what's attached to it. And for the many black folks who already have, this big, little word has held and will hold little to no power over them. Project Nigga has been going on my whole life. And I've been around long enough to tell you that the project has failed. And it's failed precisely because a word cannot change the context of someone else's intention, or the effect of a projected reality that you are sensitive to, especially if you're black, and especially if deep down you believe the word applies to you. I refer back to the Baldwin quote that opened this video. Because of history and reality, even when a black man directs the N-word angrily against another black person, it isn't accompanied with the racial superiority implication attached to the original term. Again, context matters when someone who isn't black uses it in an intentionally provocative manner. It's a declaration of not just hostility to a perceived lack of character, but a specific reference to the lowest observable tendency assigned to black people, whether it applies to the person who receives it or not. Which means there's a dehumanizing intention attached to it. And while violent reactions to the term are unjustified, those who aggressively use this term shouldn't be surprised when someone they've chosen to respond to or provoke decides to rise or fall to the level that was assigned to them. I'm not going to pretend that I haven't seen or noticed the pattern of behavior of physical impulsivity that's been assigned to nigger. I have. It doesn't benefit me or anyone else to pretend otherwise. I'm not someone who believes that stereotypes are born purely from fantasy, or that denying them makes someone a sophisticated thinker. Quite the opposite. But this noticing isn't new at all. The noticing was behind racism in the first place. What is new is that algorithms are now, for some reason, good or bad, probably bad, pushing more of this content out. To some extent, this can be explained by viewer preferences, but I don't believe that preferences, as important as they are the exclusive determining factor of what's going into people's feed. And the fact that platforms have announced changes to their algorithms in the past is a confession of results rigging and proves that search results are not truly organic. If you're seeing something online, it's because engineers behind it want you to see it, not just based on your preferences, but on theirs as well. This should be common sense to anyone with a smartphone, and smarter people might ask themselves why this is happening, and in particular, why now? The dictionary definition of respect tells us a little bit about respect, but its root components are, once again, far more revealing. When we consider the parts of the word itself, we can make some grounded, tangential inferences. Respect etymologically and in practice means to take another look, or to look again. From this we can infer the compassion, patience, and decency to consider things and other people further than we might have upon first sight. It means taking another look, past one's immediate assumptions, and in an earnest effort to validate their accuracy on behalf of the humanity or potential humanity of the other person. Acts in terms of disrespect tell the other person that, "You're not worth my time to consider. I've figured you out, and my limited assumptions alone are good enough for you." So casting the N-word flippantly on someone, particularly upon your first encounter with their poor behavior, or without sufficient information to render an informed verdict, is inherently disrespectful, and it's situationally unwise and unnecessary. And shouting it from the rooftops is childish stuff. And even though it may feel good, it's unlikely to help in the moment. And there is an irony in this. One of the supposed characteristics of these so-called ninjas is low impulse control, or more specifically, hastily reacting before thinking. Based on that, isn't it pretty niggardly to recklessly project that term onto someone, even in consideration of behavioral patterns when the only definitive information you have to go on is skin tone and a singular reactive moment? When someone meets a black person, they're not meeting black people any more than they're meeting the Jews when they meet a Jewish person, or whitey when they meet a white person. Depending on our past experiences, it may be easy to default to angry reaction on very powerful, real negative experiences. I've had them. But as hard as it may be for many of us, we ought not do this because it's not fair. We may judge. We may even prejudge. But if we can avoid making ourselves executioner based on our judgments, we can avoid degrading ourselves. So I'm not even saying that anyone needs to let their guard down. This is not advice against being quietly reserved or internally defensive upon considering strangers of any kind. This is a caution against reckless, offensive reactions to our beliefs. In our world right now, it's understandable to have our antennas up a bit. Just don't go around poking people with it. And I'm speaking from experience here, because I've been called this word before, and each time, behaviorally speaking and situationally, it was silly, lame, and totally didn't apply. As I've gotten older, my concerns surrounding this word have vanished, leaving not even a hint of that N-word sting.
My friend and I will say, Nick.
Do your worst.
My adherence to a personal code of conduct, though hardly perfect, has made this particular term inapplicable to me. It would be a category error, and anyone who would lamely attempt to call me it in person or online might as well call me a Norwegian while they're at it, because it would be that ridiculous. Our actions, baseline disposition, and habits alone will automatically make an obvious liar out of anyone obtuse enough to try to niggify another person with whatever kind of narrow term occurs to them. Speaking for myself, I'm not insecure enough to care either way, because anyone who'd try to pin something on you that doesn't apply is revealing their own inferior character. And who are they for you to care about?
What is happening?
Chelsea set you up. She invited all those people to come watch you make a fool of yourself.
It's okay. I'm not a fool, and she cannot make something out of me that I am not.
Rose, we have to do something.
I will turn the other cheek, because that is what princesses do.
And that would be my advice to any young black person, or any person really. Make liars out of the little critics and strangers you may cross in your world. And don't do it in anticipation of anyone's opinion or approval. Do it simply for the sake of being dignified and right, which is the only real strength worth pursuing. A quick story. In the 2nd grade, a classmate took a little yellow pencil sharpener that I liked from my desktop after I went to use the bathroom. Later in the day, I caught her with it and was able to prove the theft because there was a tiny distinct mark I left on it for just that very reason. The point is that this kid, because of her group, was allowed to simply be a little momentary thief. It didn't occur to me, and it probably didn't occur to my teacher to consider it racially. And there was no race-based designation that could have applied to her. She was just a kid after all. But because she wasn't black, she was simply allowed to have made that mistake. And that's fair enough to me. But there are people that have a hard time extending that kind of consideration and grace to people who don't look like themselves. And believe it or not, anyone who disrespects you on the basis of race, in either direction, because this really does work both ways, in most cases, that's a them problem, not a you problem. Because people are capable of seeing, in particular, the negative patterns associated among groups, fatigue and resentment toward negative behavior will logically scale differently and may fall unfairly against individuals who are superficially associated with a particular behavior. This is the price that the quote-unquote good ones pay by virtue of how they look and by the behavior of people who look like them. And the markup of this costly transaction is enabled by our predictable but hasty reluctance to extend grace in consideration of character and situation. To be fair, One of the reasons this reluctance happens, whether it's right or wrong, is because people act carelessly too often. In fact, taking race out of the equation, there are simply way too many people conducting themselves cluelessly in public. In light of this reality, I don't begrudge anyone being on guard upon first meeting me. But on those rare occasions that someone's defensive disposition becomes an offensive one, my own diplomatic but firm resolve will resist accordingly. This is a universal right of all people, but it doesn't give anyone carte blanche to act a violent fool. Things, as far as our screens tell us, have gotten so bad, people simply don't have the time or patience to give strangers the benefit of the doubt. And by the way, this is another tendency that is not race-specific. I'm not picking on a single group here. The outgroup fatigue and reluctance to extend olive branches is what our so-called fatigued neighbors have in common. It should go without saying that not everyone thinks in the way I'm about to describe. But if the quiet part behind some of this black fatigue mode of thinking could be given voice, it would sound something like this. I don't like it when people steal, but I really hate it when black people steal because it's almost always them, and I'm beyond tired of it. So let's roll with that idea. I don't believe in running away from scary truths. I prefer to run at them and see where it leads. I don't enjoy saying that black people, frankly speaking, account for a disproportionate amount of our petty theft and violent street crime. This is not a debatable point. And it's a good thing that people can express it more safely online because we have to air our dirty laundry. The internet has allowed this to happen, but our approach does matter, and there's always a smarter way to do the wash. This black fatigue that everyone's talking about is an unfortunate label, because while people think it's pithy and precise, it's actually pretty imprecise. But aside from maybe ghetto fatigue, I don't have a better reactionary shorthand, and I don't care to develop one. Black fatigue is here, and we're stuck with it, I suppose. But when taken literally and considered for more than a few seconds, you might see how black fatigue manages to be less forgiving, less discriminatory, and less friendly to black people as a whole than even our nuclear N-word. Because even the N-word, while its Spanish and Latin root points to black, it doesn't explicitly say black in our very own language like black fatigue does. As acidic as the N-word is and sounds, it's actually a more nuanced euphemistic dodge. This point is kind of important. This is not a justification for nigger, or the bigots who use it, but an attempt to show how black fatigue as a shorthand is intentionally or unintentionally a bolder form of racism, a word I'm very careful to avoid overusing.
Met another fellow from Minnesota yesterday. Big guy, sheriff, I think. I liked him too.
We're very friendly people.
No, that's not it. Pretty unfriendly, actually. But it's the way you're unfriendly. How you're so polite about it. Like you're doing me a favor.
Well, this has been enjoyable.
Words communicate in two ways, how we see them and how we hear them. By modifying the root, and particularly the sound of its Latin and Spanish roots, the N-word at least takes a half step away from the word black. It distances itself, phonetically, the way it sounds, from the word black. It may be why arguments have and are made by some defenders of this friendly term, that nigger doesn't mean all black people. They were different words for black that referred to different kinds of black people. I don't think that's the most elegant distinction in the world, but at least it's some distinction, some attempt to acknowledge that all the bad shit associated with it doesn't apply to everyone. And if you follow this logic, the logic that tries to differentiate ninjas from black people, you can't also say that the black and black fatigue doesn't mean what the words themselves say. The N-word may have a much longer evil history, but it does provide a shade of nuance. I think that's my first pun for today. Speaking of jokes, here's a brother that launched his career off of this very distinction.
It's like a civil war going on with black people. And there's two sides. It's black people and there's niggas. And niggas have got to go. Every time black people want to have a good time, ignorant ass niggas fuck it up.
Black fatigue as a term doesn't bother making such distinctions. And who has the time to do that anyway? That would require thinking, and then talking about the things we thought about. And fuck that, right? Of course, in communicating, it's important to get to the point. But the point we're getting to has to be the right point. Otherwise, for all of our impatience, we haven't saved any time at all. We've merely arrived somewhere quickly and misinformed. And our culture almost idolizes this mindset. Confronted by any length of thought, people proudly say things like, "Too long, didn't read." And to them, I think, too bad, learn to read. That's one of mine, by the way. If you don't have the time to read or think, or something is lengthier than you'd like, how do you have the time to GAF and respond in the first place? I actually think that a certain amount of forethought ought to be the suggested retail price of admission to any kind of discourse. Because it's a rare person that can say something that is insightful in the span of a few words. Writing something that is succinct and precise requires a bit of skill and consideration. Don't try this if your capabilities are limited to TikTok, shorts, and emojis. Admittedly, the spirit behind black fatigue can be either racist or non-racist, depending on the mindset or context of the person saying it. But words mean things, and have a meaning of their own, regardless of our subjective intentions behind it. This ambiguity gives language the advantage of flexibility, but the disadvantage of misuse and imprecision. Words. And this is where communication usually breaks down. The intent of the person using the words versus the words themselves. The apologetic phrase, "I didn't mean it that way," comes to mind. A lot of folks, myself included, disliked the Black Lives Matter slogan. I won't get into it, but I still don't like it, and I think it's dumb for the same reasons that most slogans are dumb. They're too short to be precise, which means they invite, upon arrival, immediate resistance or misunderstanding. But I suspect, and I'm guessing here, that a lot of people who objected to Black Lives Matter as a movement and label did so on the grounds that it was racially exclusive, and that it radically overgeneralized a complex situation by the careless application of the word black. And with that, I agree. So if someone takes this very reasonable exception to the linguistic imprecision behind the Black Lives Matter slogan, but that same person has no qualms or hesitation with black fatigue on similar grounds, I think that's some convenient dissonance, and you might want to take a look at it. I've considered the counter-argument here as well. Someone could argue by saying, well, Black Lives Matter points to the exaggerated problem of police brutality, and it's wrong because it suggests that black people are its exclusive victims. But black fatigue, that's a real problem. You could argue that. But if you consider these two ideas together, that is, accepting the black in black fatigue as constructive, while objecting to the black in Black Lives Matter, I think you'll find that dog won't hunt, and that you're exaggerating your preferred concerns qualitatively, if not quantitatively, in the same way that some of your ideological opponents do. Because to explain this more clearly, all black people are not the serious cause of anyone's fatigue. Just like all black people are not the exclusive innocent victims of police violence when it happens. If you can see one exaggeration and convenient exception, you should certainly be able to see the other. Getting back to dogs, I have no dog in this fight, but if I did, it would certainly fight better than this.
What are you doing?
That's how I roll.
So the Black Fatigue slogan was born with the same original sin that a lot of slogans are. But I'll make no further campaign against it, beyond expressing my personal distaste for it. It's here and it's dumb, because we suck. I'm not calling for anyone to self-censor, and it doesn't make someone a terrible person for using it. But I personally will try and remember to restrict my use of it as a rhetorical bait. I might refer to it when appropriate, but considering my misgivings toward it, I probably won't use it without somehow qualifying it first. Had we been given another term besides Black Fatigue, one that had been able to quickly convey by itself and in itself the concept of some black people, or even too many black people, it could have galvanized more consideration among the racial population that it's isolating. But we didn't get a creative, smarter phrase, because like a lot of things these days, that would have been too hard.
Aww.
Black Fatigue makes a better hashtag, because hashtags don't have to be precise or right. They just have to be easy. And again, this is why I dislike most slogans. A lot of them are dishonest or inaccurate. In service of winning some cause, or owning our ideological opposition, we want to be right without having to be right.
We was just looking for some cocktail napkins.
Hey, where? Under her dress?
You're impossible.
You're easy.
And this is just another little insidious way that our cultural decline continues, imperceptibly, starting at the individual level of thought, or lack of thought. The best, rarest slogans don't sacrifice clarity for speed or controversy. Anytime you take away words, you are narrowing thought, and you're making things duller. If you don't have the patience or time to be reasonably precise and responsible with your words, there is an alternative to putting yourself out there.
Here's another idea that's going to be very controversial. You could shut the up.
So, Black Fatigue. Yes, it's quick. Yes, it's easy. But so is a Slurpee. And neither is good for you. Somehow in our current year, with the help of algorithms, we've managed to popularize a new term that is in some ways even worse than nigger. So to restate this one last time, by calling it Black Fatigue, this label itself is making the association between a host of bad behaviors and skin color. And it's casting it on black people in general. Black itself is the problem according to this term. Black Fatigue, by its own words, says that all black people are the same, because Black Fatigue makes black the determining factor. And people who use this phrase may not agree that all black folks are the same. And I don't believe that most people think that. But that is the implication of those two words. I think it's unreasonable to use this phrase and not expect any black person to think that you are talking about them specifically. So this is not a very helpful or precise addition to public discourse. Perhaps we should try noticing that. And try noticing that our polite, modern, largely left-wing sensibilities have helped erase character by rationalizing, and in so doing, condoning all matter of unacceptable behavior based on race and low expectations. And while you're noticing that, try noticing how this new, largely right-wing propagated shorthand of Black Fatigue also erases character by considering black people categorically inferior for their color, regardless of anything else.
I may not get there with you.
After the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Martin Luther King expressed his concerns about integrating into a burning house. Well, it looks like there was never a sound single house to begin with. Just two houses next door to each other and slowly burning apart. Two houses that are now in pitiful shape, and two houses that are actually similarly broken. Maybe it's time that decent people build a new house based on character. And whatever that house should look like after taking character into primary account, however it looks on the surface after that, will be what it ought to be, without quotas, prejudices, or preferences beyond a positive demonstration of genuine quality. And fortunately or unfortunately, the demands of higher standards might be more or less racially diverse than many people will prefer. So be it. The state-approved brand of superficial, feel-good diversity is not the driver behind any winning team, either on the court or in the country. Character is. Goodness is. Goodness can and will and does produce things that are superficially varied and unvaried, diverse or monolithic. But variety or diversity by itself can't produce good things, because goodness only comes from good. And there is such a thing as a diversity of failure, a diversity of evil. Now, that doesn't feel good to hear, but it's the truth. And it's for adult ears and hearts only. But even the things that appear to be or are evil ultimately serve good in the long term. Evil does have a job to do, and as it does its damage, it creates the space for things to get better. You could say that evil is part of a grander plan, and nothing we can do against it can stop its ironic service toward progress. Now, that's a funny gospel.
Ironic.
Tying this back to diversity, there's nothing inherently good or bad about it. The algorithm won't favor this message one bit, and people who prioritize superficiality won't either. But it doesn't matter. If people, regardless of how they describe themselves politically, are no longer willing to base their associations on character, then they're not people worth associating with. But there will also be persons of lesser character who will be surprised and upset when other people want to exclude them from their circle and deny them access to their world. But this revelation won't help those who need it, because people with poor dispositions usually aren't reflective enough to understand why they're being isolated.
With this bonus check, I'm putting in a swimming pool. If there's enough left over, I'm gonna fly you all down here to help us dedicate it.
I can't swim, Clark.
I know that, Eddie.
One final point on this subject is how our allegiances and biases toward our own political preferences and racial identity blind too many of us and bind too many of us to the things that we should be beyond, but aren't. That's fine. It's the kind of fundamental kindergarten work appropriate for this planet right now. And I accept that fact too.
I mean, seriously?
Maybe. I don't know. Not really.
People reasonably take exception to drawing parallels between the inflammatory use of words and committing actual physical violence. That point is acknowledged and respected. But both behaviors, while importantly different in scale, are importantly similar contextually in that they both represent a reactive and impulsive escalation of a situation. They both make things worse. Before every unpleasant or violent situation, there are negative thoughts, escalated by words, and escalated further by action. These are distinct choice points along a confrontational line where a person can engage, withdraw, or de-escalate. As a society, we've discouraged acts of aggressive violence, but also defensive force. And while that's happened, people have doubled down, especially online, on shit-talking, our 21st century national pastime, the hobby of punks. And it doesn't say much good about our culture. People treat each other rudely for the simple fact that they expect to get away with it. This is punk behavior, but we generally give it a pass because, like every other reductive thing in our world, it's easy, and actual violence is worse. But the fact that the step toward physical violence is worse than verbal instigation does not justify the first harsh inflammatory word that sets things off. We'd be wise to remember that. Maybe you've noticed that people tend to allow more latitude in escalating hostilities when those hostilities are escalated by people who look like them, or who they identify with for any other reason. This is the kind of thing I've noticed, and it's a human stereotype that, to me, is the most reliably predictive. You can always count on people to proceed from a selfish starting point. And naturally, those sympathies extend more easily to people they identify with, whether it's on K Street or Main Street. People will give a pass to the folks in their own camp, and then backward justify it, often dishonestly. It's what people do. Different groups seem susceptible to unique tendencies which manifest distinctly across racial lines. This produces observable patterns of behavior, good and bad. We don't mind noticing and bemoaning other people's tendencies and behaviors, but we have a harder time owning up to our own. Again, this doesn't suggest that we shouldn't notice bad things and call them out when appropriate. Done carefully, I'd encourage it. Do it. But we shouldn't think too highly of ourselves while we do it, or too negatively of the other person when they're wrong. And striking this balance is hard to do, but important to do. Because when you confront other people's negative behavior from that impure place of self-satisfied superiority, the other person will sense it, and they'll resent you instead of noticing themselves. Confrontational encounters give us a slim chance to positively demonstrate right action. But that chance is made even slimmer when we approach it with hostility. Unfortunately, this assumes, probably incorrectly, that most people are interested in actually helping others or considering a reasonable criticism. Given the tone of our discourse and the popularity of all things aggressive, we seem more interested in expressing our often justified resentments. It feels good, but it passes quite quickly, and it leaves you with nothing but some clicks and a wet towel. Some people call that rage bait. I prefer to call it rage-turbation. See what I did there? We can create accurate, clever slogans.
Yes, we can.
Here's a tale from an old gym I went to over 10 years ago. A young black teen who finished a game of basketball on the lower level heads up to the weight room to work out. This whole facility was air-conditioned, but this part of the gym was a bit warmer because it was upstairs. He was wearing a dark red tank top, but he took it off, either to cool off or show off. It doesn't really matter why. I thought, okay, this guy wants to see himself and be seen. But it was ignorant behavior. And I thought, someone should talk to him, and it might as well be me before someone else fucks it up. Because this was the very kind of little thing that could have become a bigger thing if someone didn't come correct, as we used to say. So I did, and this is basically what I said. Young brother, no disrespect. If I was in your shape when I was your age, I probably wouldn't want to wear a shirt either. But this club has a real strict policy on it, and in a minute, someone from downstairs will be coming up to make you put a shirt on. So you might want to do it yourself and avoid that whole thing. I don't want to tell you what to do. I just want to save you the trouble.
Oh, my bad, man. Good looking out.
He put his shirt on, and that was the end of it. Now, I could have just as easily said,
"Nigga, put a shirt on. Tired of you motherfuckers."
And how do you think that would have went down? I've been better served when I've elected to tell that side of me to shut the hell up. Sometimes it's better to bite your tongue. All it requires is applying that pattern recognition skill that everyone brags about having to situations where the restraint of anger is the correct answer. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. You can then consider those moments as successful credit hours in the moral classroom, because it's even more important to exercise our own internal restraint when we encounter others who are clearly failing to exercise their own. Because feeling good about feeling bad about others doesn't elevate you. And I suspect that the reason that inflammatory finger-pointing content of all kinds and from all camps is so popular is because there's an emotional payoff to it. a payoff that requires very little effort and makes us feel a little better about ourselves. For just a few minutes, everyone can tell themselves that they're not the problem, at least not this problem.
You need people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. What'll I make you? Good? You're not good. You just know how to hide. How to lie.
It's hard to tell exactly how much, but some of what's presenting itself as fatigue and noticing is starting to smell a bit more like the prideful, careless reacting to even more careless reacting, accompanied, of course, by the dopamine hit that follows it. Given all of the less than stellar behavior that we're seeing online, this criticism of criticism itself is a challenging case to make. I know. In a sense, this is an attempt to criticize criticism without being too critical. I don't want to dissuade the noticing that leads to a correcting, but I do want people to correctly correct things, if that makes sense. On one hand, I sympathize with the so-called fatigue over unruly, sometimes violent behavior. We should call that out. On the other hand, I have a bad feeling that the emerging iteration of fatigue and noticing is just the latest kind of division and othering that will lead society down another dark, divided path. And considering this cynically, maybe that's exactly why we're seeing more of it. Personally speaking, my fatigue is more centered around how the larger population, from leaders to citizens, kinda sucks right now. But that observation makes me want to direct my attention inward toward my own deficits, the only thing I can control, and the only thing I'm entitled to work on in the first place. And I've got my share of work to do. Do you really think this world would be in the kind of shape it's in if you could allocate all of the ills to the so-called ninjas, immigrants, or any other single group in this world? Again, everyone seems to agree that someone else is the problem. And that's our problem. Because it means we're going to continue to focus on what ought to be done by and about other people.
You still looking for us?
We found what we're looking for.
No. No. It wasn't us. It was them. The warriors.
You warriors are good. The rest is ours.
Returning to our main point, the N-word and other racial epithets communicate less concern about the objective nature of poor character, and more concern with its observable packaging. Of course, one of the reasons this is done is so people can make quick decisions when there's little time or occasion for an objective character analysis. Fair enough. And in that vein, there isn't enough time for a larger argument justifying some degree of stereotyping or criminal profiling, because explaining that idea in a clear, responsible way requires more time than I have right now. But observable patterns certainly exist. And the very notion of algorithms that platforms like YouTube leverage to function are the proof of patterns, because they're built on patterns.
I don't want any trouble. Just get out. Can't stand y'all.
Noticing and communicating about patterns isn't evil, but how you respond to the data gathered from them can be.
Yeah, but that's, that's okay.
I do not believe anyone who claims that they do not see the distinct, observable behavioral patterns among different groups of people. I also don't believe people who say they don't see race. That sounds nice, and I know what they're trying to say. But of course we see and consider race, as well as everything that may or may not come with it.
Now go on, get.
breaks my heart. Boy, that young going bad.
This doesn't make us bad people. Racial differences are not inconsequential, but they are contextually and variably consequential because despite ourselves, we live in a dynamic world, not a static one.
Where is everybody?
This dramatically impacts the effects of biological differences. We shouldn't run away from this reality, even if sometimes we don't like the results. We're all different, which paradoxically makes us all the same. In that sense, anyway. This is the actual, more profound truth behind diversity. And you won't learn it in university because it hurts people's feelings. And it requires a mature and responsible reaction to it. And if you arrive at the point where you can appreciate it, in spite of its scary implications, you will actually discover that this is ultimately a safe space too. Because like our environment, we also have the capacity to change. But that's a choice.
What I'm trying to say is that if I can change,
Я думаю, что каждый тоже изменился сегодня.
and you can change,
Вы можете измениться.
everybody can change.
Каждый может измениться.
Some people, because of their conditioning and preferences, make their racial identity a large part of their personal character. And in so doing, they restrict themselves to it, in direct proportion to how much they prioritize it. Because we own ourselves, this is everyone's right. But it's a spiritual dead end.
I've always loved you.
For all the pain and suffering and vile things that happened to me, blame everybody, blame white people, blame society, blame God. I didn't get no answers because I was asking the wrong question. You have to ask the right question.
Like what?
Has anything you've done made your life better?
If we plan on dealing with others respectfully, as respect was defined earlier, we have to really ask ourselves what and why they are, who they are. That's when we start getting real and start really seeing. And we should do this because it's the right thing to do. And in spite of the fact that a lot of people are going to live up to or down to their stereotype. So we can acknowledge the patterns and things that are in front of us, on our screens and in real life. To the extent that online platforms have made once taboo discussions more prevalent will be, despite some necessary ugliness, a good thing in the long run. All of this fatigue and noticing is fine, but it's only a first step. There's real work ahead, beyond rage debating.
America first! America first! Get that through your head, dude!
It's hard to clean a huge mess without getting down in the dirt, and our society is in need of some serious cleaning. But we must be very careful in how we proceed and present our observations, because with considered effort, we can do so constructively and respectfully.
I love black people, but I hate niggas, boy. Oh, I hate niggas. Boy, I wish they let me join the Ku Klux Klan. Shit, I do a drive-by from here to Brooklyn.
I hear you, Chris. More so for the first part, but I understand the emotion behind the second. My personal fatigue is more of an exhausted disappointment, but there's some latent anger there too. I'm working on it, and it helps to focus on the good things, which we can all do. Still, I'd go one step beyond what Chris was joking about there, because besides black people, my love is reserved for anyone who is on balance more good than bad, but more importantly, wants to be better than they are. As for the things and people that are, let's say, insufficiently good, I still have love for that thing in the universe that stubbornly insists on making bad things better in time, however long it takes. If it takes a lifetime or lifetimes, we will learn. We may be stubborn, but our stubbornness and stupidity will not outlast eternity. And it most assuredly won't save our dying bodies or the decaying skin that so many of us are fixated on. In a material culture, it makes sense that many of us will continue to focus a bit too much on our material bodies. After all, it's what we see first, but it needn't be what we see last.
I am so pretty. I am so pretty. Look at me. Everybody just wants to be me. I'm pretty.
I'll wind this down by indicting myself. I'm not a warm and fuzzy kind of guy, but my kids have softened me up, and I can't help that now. The way I'm approaching the content made here is a conscious effort to produce something that is at least on balance more good than bad, despite some of the things I will get wrong in the process. I would love to express a greater affection for mankind, but I'm not quite there yet. And to pretend that I am would be fake. But I can at least say that my resentments are beyond color. And I think that much is a decent start. And anyone, even the most ardent racially minded or weary among us, can evolve past a strictly racial consideration of other people, despite all of our misgivings. Of course, the choice is ours. But considering everything, I still stubbornly believe that somehow it'll be worth it. And I maintain that our spiritual evolution requires seeing beyond the superficial, because at root we are beyond superficial. And the pressure of time and circumstance will push us and prime us, despite of, but also in service of ourselves, right when we need it most. I think that about wraps this up. That's a closing joke, and it's in context. My voice is starting to go. I've spoken enough for one day, and will return to non-racial matters for the next one. I'll let my homies Richard P., Denzel X, and Forrest G bring it home.
One thing I got out of it was magic I'd like to share with you. Voice said to me, he said, look around, what do you see? And I said, I see all colors of people doing everything, you know? And the voice said, do you see any niggas? I said, no. I said, you know why? Because there aren't any. And it made me say, oh my God, I've been wrong. I've been wrong. I got to regroup my shit. I mean, I said, I ain't gonna never call another black man a nigga.
In the past, I've made sweeping indictments of all white people. And these generalizations have caused injuries to some white folks who did not deserve them.
I no longer subscribe to sweeping indictments of one race. I intend to be very careful not to sentence anyone
who has not been proven guilty. It can be stated that I wish nothing but freedom, justice, and equality. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all people.
In Vietnam,
I'll beat your head in this goddamn pointer! That's it.
That's all I have to say about that.
That's so right on, man. You said it all.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
Thanks for listening.